Okay, great. Now for the jump animation, we're going to use a different condition. We are going to use the trigger parameter, because what the trigger parameter does is whenever it's triggered, it turns itself off in the next frame, so you don't have to turn it on and off continuously. And it's great for something like if you're firing a weapon, or if you're throwing a punch, or something like a jumping sort of animation where the character does it once and then stops doing it. It's a pretty good parameter to use for for setting up those type of conditions. And another thing I want to show you here is this any state box here, like this block, and it basically represents, like it's like the name, any state. So if I create a transition from any state to jump, that means any state can go to jump regardless of if they have a transition to jump. So for example, if I'm in the idle state and I trigger this jump trigger, and I have a condition that links those two, let me just do that quickly. So let me just make sure the condition is jump. Right. Or there's no other options here. As soon as the jump trigger is triggered, then we'll go to the jump state. Now notice I don't have a transition from idle to jump or from walk to jump, but regardless of which state I'm in, as long as this condition is met, we're going to go from any state to the jump state. So the any state is sort of a placeholder for anything that's going on, any state that you might be in. Right, so this allows us to go into the jump state from any state. Right, so it doesn't really matter if we're in the idle state or the walk state or any other state. As soon as the jump trigger is triggered, then we're going to go to the jump state. Okay? And from the jump state, I want to make a transition back to the idle state. So when you finish the jumping animation, we're going to go back to idle. Okay, so that's how we can use the trigger parameter for this. Let's go back to Playmaker, and let's find our jump state here. And all we want to do is, again, go to the animator folder, and we want to set animator trigger. Here we go. So we want to make sure that this is below the first bool test action, right? Because if this test failed, then we're not going to jump. But once we're jumping, we want to trigger that jump animation. So that's the trigger name is jump, which is the name here. Okay, so let's try that. Look at the animator. So you can see that we have this, it does go to the jump state, but very quickly it leaves the jump state and back to the idle state. We don't necessarily want that, right? And the reason being the condition is exit time, which is 1, which means 100% of this 1 frame animation. So it basically plays the jump animation for 1 frame and then it stopped. So now let's fix that. Now remember, we have this variable in the state machine called isGrounded, which basically tells us when the character is back on the ground. And we can probably use that for the animator as well. So let's go to the animator and let's create a bool parameter, and I'm going to call this isGrounded. And from the jump state, let's go to the transition. Notice that you can either click on the transition here or click on the line directly. And we want the condition to be if isGrounded is true, then we go back to idle. And if it's not grounded, meaning the character is still in the air, then we're going to keep the jump animation, which again, let me just show you what the jump animation looks like. It looks like that. It's a one frame animation, right? So the character basically just has this pose when it's jumping. Okay, now the next thing we want to do again is to connect the variable to the parameter in the animator. So let's go set animator bool, if I can find it here. And we want to do it after the line cast, because the line cast is where we define the value of the bool variable. It's grounded. Okay, so the parameter is grounded. Again, that's the name of the parameter here. And value we're going to use is grounded. And again, we want to do it every frame. Okay, so let's give that a try. Okay, so we're in idle state, walking, we jump. Notice how we're in the jump state until we hit the ground. So that condition is working. Great, so now we've learned to use a float variable, a float parameter to determine the speed, and using that to decide which animation state we should be using. And also we use a trigger to start a jump animation, and use a bool parameter to decide when we should go back to the idle animation. Very cool.